Hi, everybody. I'm Mark Wade. I'm the publisher of Humanoids. We've produced some of the best-selling and really coolest graphic novels of all time, including The Ink Owl by Jodorowsky and Mobius, and so many more. The Techno Priests, Metabarons, and more recently things like Alitha Now and Then, or The Twilight Man. And we're here today to talk to some of the creators working with us about how you sort of rewrite science fiction in a world where everything's on fire all the time now. Joining us on this panel, we got the artist of Omni, Ms. Alitha E. Martinez. We have the creator of the upcoming futuristic tale that is a take on the Count of Monte Cristo called Count by Ibrahim Moustafa. And we have the writer of the upcoming Space Bastards series by Mr. Eric Peterson. Good afternoon, everyone.
Hello.
Good afternoon. Hello.
Is everybody holding up reasonably well under all things considered?
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's wild times, but we're getting through
it. Yeah. It's, if anybody has somebody with an infant, they might want to tell them this would be a good time to put them in a rocket ship and send them off into space.
Yeah. I want to draw comics. I don't want to live them.
I know, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I want to kind of go around the room here a little bit. What's the first time any of you experienced science fiction, literature, comics, short stories, TV, or whatever? Do you have any sort of distinct memories about that, Ibrahim? Anything?
Yeah, the very first, thing that would fall under the science fiction umbrella that I ever experienced was Superman. Be it the Christopher Reeve movies or my very first comic book was John Byrne's Man of Steel #2. And, the idea that, science sent this infant to Earth and then, he became this paragon of hope, with superpowers was just absolutely mind-blowing to me. And I've just been fascinated with the genre ever since.
Cool. Alitha?
I think it was Star Trek. And that was, being very, very, very young. I thought, well, this is how it is. This is the future we're going to go into. And then you realize, outside the country, there's not a lot of that stuff. Like Fred Flintstone was about as advanced as we're going to get. And then you come back to America and they've got like Superman and they've got, oh my goodness, remember all those little Marvel shows they used to show? And then suddenly there was Robotech. And that just blew my mind. I'm like, not only do characters change clothes, but they die and they don't come back. I'm still mourning the loss of Loy and Roy Fokker and Ben back to back. He didn't even finish his steak. It was so visceral and just the way you should tell a story to me. I'm like, I've been hooked ever since.
Spoilers, Alitha. It's only 14 years. How about you, Mr. Peterson? What's your background with science fiction?
Yeah, so I think the earliest science fiction media I saw was probably Star Wars. I mean, Star Wars was a major part of my childhood. I was born in '83, so I missed it, but they were around, on Betamax or whatever. And but I think for me, really, when I was 12 or 13, my grandmother by accident introduced me to 2000 AD, and that kind of stayed with me forever.
All right, so by accident, what do we mean by accident?
I saw the Judge Dredd Stallone movie, and I say what you will about the movie, the quality of the movie, but when you're 12, 13 years old, it's it's a cool universe, it's a really cool city and all that. And so I kind of, my grandmother worked next door to a comic book shop, and she said, what kind of comics should I send this kid? And I think my mom had said well, he just saw Judge Dredd and really liked it, and she had no idea of the content or anything. So I was reading a bunch of Simon Bisley work and all this stuff, at the ripe age of 12 and 13. And then I stuck with it. I've always been a giant 2000 AD fan. And then, Vertigo, that led me on to Vertigo Comics and kind of some of the other stuff that was happening in comics publishing in terms of mature readers' titles.
Well, I alluded to this going into the panel, but the world really is completely on fire. 2020 is a complete flaming disaster. And it's the kind of stuff that 5 years ago we would have said, that's the kind of stuff you see in science fiction movies and science fiction novels, but it's not. It's real now. It's this place that we're in. So trying to build science fiction on top of this, the future, the possibilities, does it does it make you more cynical? Does it make you want to do more hopeful stuff? Like, what's your back? Joe, pick up from here. What's your take on this? How do you tell science fiction in a world in which everything is science fiction right now?
Yeah, it's an interesting challenge, right? Especially because things are changing so rapidly right now that you want to tell a story that's going to age well, and you don't know if in even a year, if things that you're doing are if you have a story with traditional policing in it, for example, right?
Right.
That may look very different soon. So I think part of the intrigue of science fiction is the speculative aspect of it, right? We want to kind of look at what things might become, and that's where a lot of the cool ideas stem from. But I think at the same time, you have to find a way to keep it relevant. So it is definitely challenging, and I think like you said, I mean, there's plenty to choose from right now, right?
Well, with Space Bastards, you backed into it, man. I mean, you backed into it. It's the post office is no longer the place to go to send packages in your world.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think when it comes to world building, I was just talking with my co-writer, my partner, Joe Aubrey, on this. Is like, we're not intentionally, but I think we're kind of like the antithesis of Gene Roddenberry, meaning if there's ever any sort of thematically, if we can kind of explore modern woes or like modern human flaws, then we purposefully don't build in technology in our worlds to replace that, because we want to kind of explore that. Space Bastards really works kind of as a piece of commentary or satire, in addition to being science fiction. So,
yeah. Alitha, any thoughts?
Oh yeah, for me,
you always have thoughts, which is one of the reasons we have you, because we love you.
For me, this is you all see it as being part of, like, how do we make it different? This is a new frontier, because the exclusion, the perspective you're speaking from is from what we've seen all along. There has been very little inclusion of women in this world that, isn't in what's the equivalent of the refrigerator box for sci-fi, the cryogenic freezer. And especially people of color, we don't have a voice in this arena just yet. And we are not really seen in a way as part of the fabric of this. It's either something is happening to us or we are being saved from something. We're not even in a position to be the true heroes in these stories, that even when it is your legacy, your hero's journey is being handed to you. So you are not experiencing it as a true hero yet. So for me, it's brand new. This is new ground to tread. Every book that brings us closer to that more completed narrative that I did see with Gene Roddenberry's work, with his work that showed us that we have a more inclusive cast, and it's just naturally so. I see a lot more pushback against that in a lot of the science fiction I read, whether it swings the pendulum too far. So we're traveling in a strangely all one species kind of race kind of ship, or something that seems like, again, the hero's journey is being handed to the other. So we're still othering people in a world that's speculative, and we don't have to be doing that.
No, you're right. Science fiction, as we've always said, science fiction at its best is really an allegory for what's happening right now, and it's a commentary on what's happening right now. So, the good news is, pouring through a lot of recent science fiction from the last year or so, last 6 months or so, even with the publishing lag that happens between turning in a story and having it see print, I'm seeing a shift. I'm seeing the beginnings of a real tectonic shift in terms of awareness, in terms of representation, in terms not only in character but in creator. So we have a long way to go. But you make some great points. Ibrahim, how has where we are now, like the last couple of years, how has that changed the way you look at the future as you're outlining it in your stories?
Well, it's interesting. As Alitha was talking about, inclusion, I think, is the subject that's on the table more than it ever has been in terms of the broader conversation amongst everybody. For me personally, I'm not used to seeing, my culture represented in stories, and so it's something that I am really leaning into. Just because, usually when Middle Easterners are portrayed in something, it's a pastiche or they're the bad guy or whatever. So that's something I definitely moving forward want to try to shine a little bit more of a light on. And just, I think a big goal for me is to normalize that culture and, just diversity in general, because it is normal, but it's not normal in fiction, or at least normal enough. So that's something I definitely aspire to do moving forward.
What's interesting is that you're using a lever that is hundreds of years old to achieve what you're doing right now. How did the Count of Monte Cristo come onto your radar to begin with?
Well, I've always been a fan of revenge stories, and so when you kind of get into those, everything sort of reverts back to that. Everything has kind of been inspired by that. It's sort of the Proteus of all of those, right? So I think I want to say I originally discovered it because I loved the movie The Mask of Zorro, and then I was looking at the back of the Blockbuster box, and it said, if you like this, try this. And then I watched that, and then I found the book and all that. So yeah, and that movie, or that story, is such a universal. It has so many universal things in it, right? Someone being unjustly imprisoned, and for a crime they didn't commit, and the idea of incarceration on that level, and then just the sort of classism that's involved in it. So it was written hundreds of years ago at this point, really, but there's so much that's still relevant today. So I think you can take those themes and kind of put them in any setting, and it still plays really well.
That's one of the reasons we wanted to publish it when it came in and the pitch came in. It's so clear. I was skeptical at first, to be honest, because I didn't know that it would really work in today's gestalt. But boy, you really pulled it off, and it really does. You play up the aspects that you said that are currently relevant. So good on you, man. It's a good.
Thank you.
Alitha, your challenges are different. Your challenges are making things look, like the day after tomorrow, as opposed to reading it like the day after tomorrow. Like designing all the bits of Omni and that world, and especially the idea of she has 9 different kinds of intelligence. What does that look like on the page? Like, how did you approach that?
Well, luckily I had a very good script. It starts there, and as I read it, I first see the movie. So as the movie played in my mind, it kind of told me, okay, this is what we need. And to come like, how do you visualize this? How do you make it clear enough to people that this is what's going on without being overwhelming to the senses? And when when I first read it, it read like a novel. It's like, I want to sit down and read this just as a book. Don't draw this thing. But that was a challenge, to be able to go, okay, if you're going to draw this, let's make this as clear as possible, so that, again, you can kind of meet that standard you kind of hold to, that if you can read it without the words, can you read the pictures? So to me, just getting to create like that, that's my favorite thing, to be able to hit the ground with a new world and be able to world build within it. Because a lot of the things I do for other companies, it's like already built in. You're just kind of like, here, let me put a little garnish up here for a minute. But this one, you're going in and making these critical decisions that affect the look of the book for other artists.
I mean, the multicolored avatars was a masterstroke, and I can't remember. That was yours, right? Not Devin's. I don't remember.
I don't really know. To me, I think they were doing she had named them. She's like, well, I'm just going to call these names. I said, but what if they really were so? And since I'm not the colorist, you just write these like, well, this is the pink one, or this is, so maybe it was a little funny notes I had sticking on them. They just like, well, since this is on a separate layer, let's make it the pink one. Yeah, because within my layers, I had color notes. So, and I just meant that as to, well, that was sort of Devin's described this as here, so let me write, so this is pink. And then it came out that way. So I'm like, I was pleasantly surprised that they were the colors that were written on each of the layers.
It was an effect I've never seen in comics before. And that's what I'm so hungry for after reading comics for 150 years, is some new way of representing something on the page. And that really pulled it off. And that impressed the hell out of me. So that's great.
That's so in other words, as usual, it's the happy accident.
Yeah. I would think that most great creations are probably a part of that. I don't know anybody who, has the great creation because they sat there for 40 years and thought about it. I think a lot of it is just I had this thought in the shower, and boy, it worked out.
Yeah, I was like, oh.
Yeah.
I tried to make it easy for the colorists, pink, yellow, brown.
Yeah.
And like, well, that's what you meant. So here you go.
Yeah. Well, it's the other thing that Omni does clearly is embrace the political, field today, the socially, social justice angle of today, because she's traveling around the world and dealing not only with other ignited characters who've been given powers, but sort of looking at it through a social justice lens. I mean, the first thing that you and Devin approached was really an allegory for the kids locked in cages at the border, and that was brave, and I love that. And I remember Devin saying, "Can we go this far?" Because we couldn't go this far in a DC or Marvel comic. I said, "Well, no, we can absolutely do that here. I mean, this is." It should be commenting on what's happening now. And I think that, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but would you say that science fiction is probably of all the genres of fiction, is probably the best at dealing with political and socially active stuff like that? I don't know.
Absolutely. To me, science fiction is like that crystal ball. It's speculative, like Abraham said. It's that forward thinking and makes us think of things in a way that maybe we would not have, or we wouldn't even have considered before. I think it's the one arena that gives you that golden ticket. Comics gives you a golden ticket for anyone to be able to read and enjoy a comic and settle in and just be invisible in this world. But science fiction is that much more, because it can dive deep, and you could just say, well, that's an alien culture, but it's really making you examine and look at your own culture and go, hey, that exists here on Earth. They pulled a fast one on me. Just like they remember the Titanic, there was a book about the sinking of a boat, very much like the Titanic, written many years before it actually happened. Again, was it a crystal ball, or was it looking at the time, realizing the flaws in that industry that could lead to this type of disaster, and then writing about it? And then later on we read it and go, oh, it happened. It's like, really? Or was it just an examination of the time?
Eric, when you and Joe came up with Space Bastards, talk to me about where that came from and how you built that world. And
when I started going to film school, and after I had read stuff like Transmetropolitan and all these Vertigo books and all the stuff, all the mature readers books I kind of grew up reading, and I think getting a little bit more appreciative of science fiction, especially. Joe and I met, and we were making Space Bastards movies together, and that's kind of when we realized the whole thing could kind of be an allegory for not any one thing necessarily, but just a whole lot of, like, the times, kind of the American dream, and also to kind of cutthroat capitalism in space. And we could kind of, in a sense, with world building, we could kind of really create this sort of setting where people have laser guns and stuff. We have science fiction technology, but it's America expanding throughout space. So simple infrastructure doesn't work the way it should. There's maybe a little bit of like Brazil, Terry Gilliam influence there. There's stuff that just doesn't work. And so, yeah, people out there have bad jobs still, and people are still frustrated. Yeah, just because they're exploring the far reaches of space, it doesn't necessarily mean that people are stopping to ask, like, what is the meaning of my life and what have I become? And so something like the Intergalactic Postal Service comes along and says, you can get shot at for a living, but this is the one job where you can actually be your own boss. You could actually kind of be master of your own destiny, but there's a cost. And so Joe and I try to make sure that, like, that theme and the kind of the consequences of being master of your own destiny are kind of center line there.
Yeah. Speaking as freelancers all, yes.
Right.
Let me just throw this out to everybody. Like, what kind of stuff would you want to see more of in science fiction, or do you think is missing there that we're not doing enough of? I mean, inclusion is a big part of it, and that may just be the flat out answer, but is there anything else? Like, what would you like to see more of in science fiction, even just personally?
Definitely inclusion, like we talked about. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Alitha.
No. Go.
Oh, well, thank you. Inclusion, as we said, and also I think, as I kind of touched on before, there's so much happening that is unprecedented for us, and I don't think we've looked at what ramifications those things will have later. if we defund / abolish police writ large in this country, what does that look like moving forward? Because that changes the paradigm of everything. I mean, the entire landscape of community and crime shifts. I mean, if people have what they need, then crime is less of a necessity for people, right? So what does a world where that has happened look like? And inevitably somebody will exploit it, right? How does that come about? What kind of reality does that create? So yeah, I think just following the ever-changing world around us will give us those answers in time, I guess.
Yeah. Alitha?
I definitely want to maybe see a little bit of a return to the old. And what I mean by that is the old type of storytelling structure we had, where you had to be accountable to the story you're telling. Meaning, if I have a cliffhanger, I solve said cliffhanger. I don't project the story 2 years later and then come back and tell you what happened during that resolution. To me, I'm seeing, even as visual medium, a lot more, you're going to tell me what happened rather than show me what happened. Can we slow down a little bit? I know our world is speeding up and maybe that's why we're seeing this. But to me, when I read something and you've grit me and I've got it and I want to see it so badly, then I open my next issue and it's a week later and everyone's sitting around a coffee table. That drives me insane. Absolutely insane. I'm like, so what happened? You had me at hello. You left me with clutching my pearls. And then I'm where, at least in the olden days, when Superman was going to, and he said, stay tuned to the next episode. I saw the save. Here, I'm not seeing it anymore. We're just speeding up the way we tell stories and it's becoming the norm. So at this point, I sit back and I go, well, I don't want to get my hopes up because I'm pretty certain you're going to tell me about what really happened 4 or 5 episodes, 4 or 5 chapters, maybe even another volume later. And to me, that's no way to tell a story. It doesn't grab me. So maybe I'm too old fashioned. But I need a little bit more, show me what happened. Don't tell me about it.
Kids today. But you make a good point. I mean, there's so many examples I could throw out, but I don't want to name names. So
I saw the eyes lighting up.
Yeah. Eric, sir, what's your take on all this stuff?
Look, movies based on comic books are wonderful, but I do think it's changed the landscape of publishing quite a bit in the last, 10, 15 years, especially. And I know this is really broad, but I don't see a whole lot of the books out now that I grew up loving to read. A lot of times it's like either a graphic novel is put out, I feel, as kind of maybe like a pitch packet, or in serialized adventures, it's kind of like, we need to tie this into some other like transmedia marketing or something too, which is wonderful. And I want the industry to thrive and make more money and all of that stuff. But I don't know. As a comic book fan, I feel like there's less books that I pick up that the writer or the creators themselves are maybe fans of themselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like something where like I want to fall in love with a whole lot of fiction again. I think that would be wonderful. Not the movie version of the fiction.
Well, that's just it. I mean, the first question I ask of every proposal that comes into us at this office is, why is this a comic and not a movie, not a TV show? And it doesn't mean it can't be those things.
Yeah.
But I'm less interested in publishing things that are so clearly told in comics form just because it serves as a great, storyboard. That's, then what's the point of that? I mean, then like you said, it's a packet to hand Hollywood studios. And I'm not in any way saying it's not great if you can't take your property and somebody sees something in it and says, I want to make this movie. I want to make this TV show, but it's got to be a comic first, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. Is it like I don't know. And again, maybe I'm getting older and jaded or something, but I just want to read more books that I can like feel the love in the page. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that stuff's not out there now, but I just want more of it.
It's the beauty of comics is that to a large extent, I mean, if you're a fan, you're doing for money, not much. None of us are rich, but you're doing for money what you would have done for free when you were a kid, right? like, what a great job. I don't know if many other people who are selling life insurance or refrigerators, I'm sure they're happy in their jobs and their vital jobs, but they didn't grow up wanting to do that. And so we were very blessed that way. The last question is, the obverse of that, what do you want to see less of in science fiction? I'll go first and say that Fury Road was an amazing movie. Movies of that ilk are amazing movies. But if I see another dystopian future, especially given what we're living through right now, I'm just going to eat a bullet, because that's easy. It's so easy to write a dystopian future. And it's more challenging to write something that is more aspirational. Anybody else have any pet peeves about what they don't want to see?
I think that's one for me too. The post-apocalyptic, kind of barren wasteland. I think it's just that it's kind of barren at this point, right? I mean, of course, you can always tell a cool story within any setting, but yeah, I'm always looking for happier escapism these days, because again, you look out the window and it's the sky is red and you can't breathe the air right now, etc. So yeah, I guess a lighter sense of escapism here and there within the genre would be cool.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't mean you can't tell dark stories. It doesn't mean you can't tell stories with gravity, but it's what we tend to forget about Star Trek, because it was a jillion years ago, is that I don't know that it would have caught anybody's imagination had it not happened during the height of the Vietnam War, where the country, much like today, although much worse today, was divided, and the future was very much up in the air, more so than it had been for 20 or 30 years. And this was not an extension of the chaos of the world. In fact, it was sort of a reassuring look at, what, eventually we're all going to come together. Eventually we're going to make something out of this.
But doesn't that show exactly what we as a public, as consumers of this type of product, are hungry for?
Yeah.
It's like, even with all of the way we divide ourselves, what brings us truly together? And yet my answer to that is science and science fiction. How do we know this? There is actually a proven point of this, because remember on the day that Spock died, when he died, a funny scientific question popped up. Is this dress blue or is it white? And suddenly the entire world galvanized together trying to figure out, is this dress I'm seeing blue or is it white? I called my kid in here. What color is it? He says it's white. To me, it was midnight blue with a black band. I mean, we were together talking about it, coming up and say, well, this is exactly why. I'm waiting for scientists. Come and solve this problem for us. Someone tell us why. And I mean, we were all here. Everyone from all over. They're typing in different languages because we wanted to know. It's that question. We all want to know. We share that. So what I want to see less of is less division, less of the othering, because we can come together in this science. You just give us a question, a little simple question. Is this dress blue or is it white? And we were all together trying to answer it.
Well, so Eric, can you top that? Because I think that was your
No. I think for me, I won't try, but I will say personally for me, I want more science fiction that isn't afraid to ask questions and not provide answers.
Yeah.
It's something that I think I see less and less of, like this, hey, we're going to frame something here and we're going to give you all sorts of different options or try to explore some things, but we're not going to actually answer it. I think that's always really brave. And I think in current climates and everything that's going on right now, sometimes I think the question is, and getting people to listen to the question is almost as important as the answer. So
I think that if I had to predict, I would say you're probably going to see a lot of that grow out of what we're going on through today, because nobody has any answers for what's happening now. Nobody has any solutions. And so I think that you're going to see plenty of science fiction come out with a need to sort of give answers to these problems. But I also think you're going to see a lot being published that, like you said, is just posing questions without answers, because that's really the world we're living in right now. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. Alitha, Eric, Ibrahim, thanks so much for coming by and talking about this. You can find you can find all these folks' great work at Humanoids, Alitha with Omni, Eric with Space Bastards, along with his co-writer Joe, and Ibrahim with Count. we hope we still exist when this airs. And we will talk to you guys soon.